Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about The Hours by Michael Cunningham. I picked it up while prepping for my last video on Mrs. Dalloway because, this one is like a tribute to Virginia Woolf's work. I'm not sure if I'd call it fan fiction, but it definitely echoes Mrs. Dalloway in many ways. And I think I watched the movie like 5 or 6 years ago. I remember loving it, but honestly, the plot is a bit fuzzy now, so this is basically a fresh read for me. There are 3 storylines in The Hours. Each one follows a different woman over the course of a single day, and they're all tied to Mrs. Dalloway in some way. First, we have Virginia Woolf herself, back in 1923, living outside London in Richmond, and she's writing Mrs. Dalloway. She's thinking about her characters like Clarissa and Septimus, but she's also grappling with her mental health. She's fighting what she calls the devil inside her. And then there's Laura Brown in 1949, a housewife in California. And on the surface, she's got that picture-perfect life, a sweet husband, an adorable son, and she's pregnant with her second child, and she's baking a birthday cake for her husband, but deep down, she feels trapped in this perfect life. She has these buried secrets and this feeling of not belonging in the life she's living. And as she reads Mrs. Dalloway, it stirs something she's kept hidden. And she starts questioning her role as a mother and wife, the meaning of life, and even sees death as a kind of escape. She drives all the way to a hotel just to finish the book in peace. And finally, we have Clarissa Vaughn in late 90s New York City. She is basically a modern-day Mrs. Dalloway because she's a book editor throwing a party for her best friend and ex-lover Richard, a poet who's very sick with AIDS. And Clarissa lives with her partner Sally and her daughter Julia, but she's stressed about aging and time slipping away. She keeps flashing back to her youth with Richard and their friend Louis. They had this messy love triangle she still sees as the happiest time of her life. So these 3 women, Virginia, Laura, and Clarissa, they're all linked to Mrs. Dalloway, whether by writing it, reading it, or living it. And while I was reading, I was most drawn to Clarissa's storyline because there's obviously more character drama and conflict in it. But when I closed the book, the scene that really lingered was Laura in that hotel room reading because she says she loves books so much that in another life she could have spent her whole life reading. But in reality, after marriage, she has to play her role. She doesn't have a room of her own to read in peace, to really be alone with her thoughts. So she drives all the way to a hotel just to finish a book, and that really touches me. And I won't spoil the plot, but the storylines actually converge in a really unexpected way in the end. And one thing I'm totally obsessed with in this book is the epigraph. There are 2 actually. One is from Woolf's diary about the caves behind her characters, and the other is from a poem called The Other Tiger by Jorge Luis Borges. And if you know me, you know I'm a huge Borges fan. So when I saw Cunningham using this quote, it just totally put me into this book. We'll hunt for a 3rd tiger now. But like the others, this one too will be a form of what I dream, a structure of words and not the flesh and bone tiger that beyond all myths paces the earth. I know these things quite well, yet nonetheless, some force keeps driving me in this vague, unreasonable, and ancient quest, and I go on pursuing through the hours another tiger, the beast not found in verse. So this quote is all about chasing a 3rd tiger, but I think to really get it, we also need to figure out what the 1st and 2nd tigers are. So at the start of this poem, Borges, or the narrator, is sitting in a library in South America, imagining a tiger on the banks of the Ganges. And that's the 1st tiger. It's like a vivid image in his head, but later he realizes it's just a tiger made of symbols and of shadows, a set of literary images, scraps remembered from encyclopedias. And it's not the 2nd tiger, the real one, out there in the world, with hot blood and a shadow on the grass. So realizing that words can never fully capture the true essence of the real tiger, he begins chasing a third tiger. It's not the real one, and not the imagined one from his library dream, but the one he tries to construct in his poem. I feel it's like a bittersweet metaphor for the limits of literature, like the way it strives to reach reality through language, even though that pursuit is ultimately futile. And actually, in the Hours, we also have a poet, Richard, in Clarissa's storyline. He sees people around him almost as fictional characters, and he even renamed Clarissa Mrs. Dalloway, like she's stepped out of a novel. He writes her into his book, which wins him a prize, but he's still not satisfied because he dreams of writing a book that contains everything: their lives, the lives they could have lived, every way they might die. And that reminded me so much of Borges's The Garden of Forking Paths, where time forks perpetually into countless futures. And Richard even says he's out of time, feeling everything at once, like he's got this godlike, omniscient view and he wants to write it all down, but he fails because words cannot hold that infinity. It's like he's mourning his own third tiger, this dream of a perfect book that's always just out of reach. And then there's Laura Brown reading Mrs. Dalloway, and while she's reading, she's also imagining Clarissa and Virginia Woolf. Like, what was Woolf thinking when she wrote this book? Why did Clarissa survive, but Woolf chose to die? And I think as readers, we are just like Laura. We're hunting for our own third tiger. We try to grasp what the author meant, but it is always filtered through our lens. It will never be exactly what was in the author's mind. And I think Cunningham himself, while writing the character Virginia Woolf in The Hours, he said he went through all her diaries, letters, and books to bring Virginia Woolf and her world to life. But I mean, his Woolf isn't the real Virginia Woolf. It is his version of Woolf. It is shaped by his words, his research, and his imagination. It is his third tiger. And I think another important theme in this book is, how do we define our existence and what kind of life is worth living? There's a moment when Clarissa's walking through New York and she spots a woman in a trailer, maybe a movie star, and she starts thinking about immortality. She thinks that celebrities live forever in archives and books, while ordinary people like her will age and die, and even their cemeteries will crumble with wild grass creeping in. But I mean, on those archive images, just like third tigers too, they're just shadows on a screen, not the flesh and blood person. And can they really define who we are? And then there's Virginia Woolf, gazing at a tiny dead bird. She thinks about how much more space it being takes up in life than in death, how the illusion of size comes from movement, breathing, and presence. So maybe we're all caught in illusions while we live, only for death to reveal how small we really are. And of course, there's Laura, who feels stuck in a life she didn't choose. Like she's not the person she dreamed of becoming, but does that mean her life isn't worth living? Like if we cannot be famous, immortal in archives of books, or even be our truest selves, can we still love life? I think of Albert Camus, who suggests that we can embrace the absurd and say yes to life anyway. And maybe that's what Cunningham's getting at in this book, because he wrote, "Yes, Clarissa thinks it's time for the day to be over. We throw our parties, we abandon our families to live alone in Canada. We struggle to write books that do not change the world, despite our gifts and our unstanding efforts, our most extravagant hopes. We live our lives, do whatever we do, and then we sleep. It's as simple and ordinary as that. A few jump out of windows or drown themselves or take pills. More die by accident. And most of us, the vast majority, are slowly devoured by some disease, or, if we're very fortunate, by time itself. There's just this for consolation: an hour here or there when our lives seem, against all odds and expectations, to burst open and give us everything we've ever imagined. though everyone but children, and perhaps even they, knows these hours will inevitably be followed by others, far darker and more difficult. Still, we cherish the city, the morning. We hope more than anything for more. So that's all I wanted to share about the hours, but maybe these thoughts are just the tiger in my dream and not the one Cunningham's hunting for. So what's the tiger in your mind? Please feel free to share it in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.